Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Our first story today comes to us from Tales of Fantasia. Extreme overtime and just a copywriter? Fine, watch me do only my job. Let's jump right in. So I used to work as a copywriter in one of those companies that crunch out annual reports for publicly listed companies. When I went for the interview, I was told that overtime was not a common thing and that employee welfare was a thing here. Pay was average, paid leaves average, great location though, but you know, a job is a job. Took it and came into this horrible crap show. 1. The company had a severe shortage of both copywriters and graphic designers. So everyone was practically working overtime every day. 2. The company had to throw me into a meeting with the chairman of a large conglomerate here and I had to totally pretend I knew what the F I was supposed to do there. Thankfully, it turned out alright. I was given a crash course by a colleague who was too busy to teach me much as well, and the supervisor often came over to make idle chat and was offended when you did not reply her. I managed to clear my work in the first 2 weeks being there, coming to work on time and leaving work on time, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. However, one day, my colleague messaged me and told me that the supervisor was unhappy that I was leaving work on time, and it reflected badly on me. So, silly old me made it a show to stay back for another 10 to 15 minutes, even though I have finished my work. Then comes the crunch. All the companies are giving us the statements from their board of directors, chairmen, CEOs, as well as financial numbers, while we're supervising our graphic designers to push out the designs for those reports. Here comes the tricky part. I was hired as a copywriter, but over time, my job scope included managing clients as well as an accounts manager, though it was never stated, just expected, and I was the only person in the office to take this on, despite having more senior members on the team. The people I spoke to at the client side, usually in the finance offices, liked me and often texted me occasionally to ask how I was doing, aside from how the work went as well, of course. On one of the days, a graphic designer had stayed for 22 hours. Yes, 22. We weren't expecting overtime pay because that is not covered by the law. We were paid over a certain amount and therefore, overtime was not part of the package. However, according to the law, as an employee, you are not allowed to work more than 12 hours a day. However, your employer can ask you to work more than 12 hours a day in the following circumstances: an accident or threat of accident, work that is essential to the life of the company, national defense, or security, urgent work to be done to machinery or plant, an interruption of work that was impossible to foresee. I apologize, but I simply could not see how the F that was humanely possible. I had returned to office the next day to discover my designer hunched over the computer in the same clothes, bleary-eyed. I approached the supervisor and asked her why the F she was still there. Excuse me, why is the designer still here? I already included in my timeline plenty of time to work on this. We are way ahead of schedule. Why did she need OT for 22 hours? When can she go home to sleep? Well, she can go home and take a shower and come back. She has 2 hours. Ask her to leave now. I'm sorry, did I hear you right? She's been here for 22 hours and she has been working from 8 to 8 for the past few days. Supervisor, let her go home. You're just a copywriter, don't tell me what to do. Okay, so I know for a fact that she had broken the law. I have finished enough work in advance to be free for approximately 1 week. So what do I need to do? F the overtime pay, F this place. I quietly went back to my desk and started sending job applications with my resume, started keeping copies of work that I have done, and started keeping email and WhatsApp archives of conversations with my supervisor. Something I started insisting on for things to be in black and white. Over the course of the day, several conglomerates' finance officers text me to ask how the annual report is going. I told them that I was told that I'm only a copywriter and they should therefore speak to my supervisor on how the project is going. Huh? But we want you in charge. Sorry, talk to my supervisor. Lunchtime comes and goes. Supervisor asks to see me for a one-on-one meeting regarding my performance. I head in with a stack of things that I have done and sit down. She did not look pleased at all. I want to talk to you about your professionalism. You told your clients that you were no longer an accounts manager and only a copywriter, and you referred them to me? Yes, I'm only a copywriter, right? You know, we are lean on manpower so everyone wears different hats. That is not true. No one else in the office is wearing a different hat except me. That's because you're paid higher. I'm sorry, supervisor. You know that is not true. Everyone in the office knows each other's pay slips. Supervisor was silent. So the thing is, we have a very loose-lipped HR accountant who, over lunch, often talks about people's salaries to us. Not that any of us minded, as unprofessional as it was. Then we need to talk to you about your performance. You've been underperforming, and many of our clients are unhappy with you. I know that these are untrue on both accounts. I see. Okay, so I'm sorry. What is the point of this conversation? I want you to resign, so at least on your resume, it doesn't look like we fired you. No, I want you to fire me. Here, when I am fired, I'm entitled to an entire additional month's salary. This woman was trying to save money on getting me to resign. She leaves, and at the end of the day, I was told that I was fired via an email from her. I went to HR and spoke to them, confirming that I was now able to clear my annual leaves, a grand total of 21 days, brought forward from the previous year. Additionally, I asked HR via email as well whether I am able to delete anything that I am no longer working on since I am not involved with any of the projects. HR replies and says yes, I am able to do so. Therefore, I trashed the entire draft of all the corporations that I have been working on. That 1 week surplus, graphic concepts, drafts of messages from the chairman of various companies, and I even shred the notes that I took. I head home, tell my parents that I got fired, and the next day onwards, I was on leave. However, there was now one big problem. Supervisor was replacing me to go for the meetings with the bigwigs in the corporations, and apparently, they hated her style of asking questions and working. The finance people asked the boss when I'll be back, and I get a phone call 1 week later. Hi OP, how are you? Good, thank you. I hope you are well. Yes, just wanted to ask if you're still interested in working in this industry. So to sum it up, she came back to offer me a higher salary. F no. I told her that I wasn't interested. Coincidentally, within that week, I got a job offer for a job that I'm still in right now. On the last week of my notice, I returned to the office to give back the properties that belonged to the company, and supervisor wasn't pleased to see me and didn't want to speak with me, until I told her that I would be contacting the Ministry of Manpower over overtime matters. Her face turned pale, and she tried to stop me from leaving to have a more in-depth discussion, but I wasn't having any of it. I get home, open up my email, and contact the ministry as promised, complete with emails, screenshots, and more. They get back to me in a few days and tell me that I was right, that there were too many hours involved, and they would investigate accordingly. Fast forward 6 months later, I text an ex-colleague who is still there to ask how things are holding up, and he told me things were bad. The moment I had left, apparently one of the accounts managers had so badly offended some of my ex-clients that they decided to stop working with them altogether. And when COVID-19 came, these precious dollars vanished and half the staff was retrenched. The Ministry of Manpower apparently dug out a lot of dirt as well and fined the company. The supervisor, she became hot-tempered and paranoid. A lot of the existing staff are planning to resign as well. Supervisor and boss, both of them don't know any better. A 22-hour shift with a 2-hour break and then get back to work? Are you absolutely out of your mind, supervisor? You know, OP, if I were you, I wouldn't have given them any notice that I was going to contact the ministry. I would have just done it and then listened in to hear what the fallout was after. Do me a quick favor, have a look down below the video. If that subscribe button's still red, it means you're not actually subscribed to the KCC channel. Please hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Our next story today comes to us from NerdFury83. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Goes both ways. Let's jump right in. My new manager at work is one of those people that absolutely has to be in control. Even when you're exceeding every scorecard measure, keeping your head down, not putting a toe out of line, she still asks you to come to a meeting room to discuss some minor issue or another. Recently, she pulled me into a meeting to discuss me being late from work. Protocol is to call in, say we'll be late, then submit a schedule adjustment request when we arrive. She accused me of not calling in or submitting a request, but I was able to prove I did, only instead of leaving it at that, she insisted I now needed to call her and explain why I was late. That's not the process, I told her, and she said she was making a new one. So now I call her at 6 a.m. on her day off to let her know if I'm going to be late. She also had a meeting with me because my scorecard for a stat was 99 out of 100 with a target of 50. She had to point out the 1 out of 100 that I missed. She also did the same for a handling time issue where I'm hitting on average 600 seconds with a target of 1500. She needed to tell me about a call I took too long on. Suffice to say, complaints have been raised to her manager, following an incident where she was asked to follow up on something for me and claimed if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. I've been asking for everything in writing and repeat that mantra back to her when she claims to have told me something. Last week, she asked me to see her after my call. I walked over and she wasn't there, so went back to my desk. She asked me why I didn't stay around, and I reminded her of the time she put in writing that I wasn't to spend more than 1 minute waiting for her if she asked to see me and was to go back to my desk to take calls, not wasting time. She asked me to come over again, and when I did, she wasn't there. This repeated twice more before my shift was over. Each time I documented, logged out at 14:35 p.m., came to your desk, you were not there, spent 45 seconds waiting, returned to desk, and took another call at 14:38 p.m. in chat. She messages me to ask what time I finish. I tell her it was 2 minutes prior, and she says we can catch up now. I tell her that my shift is over and ask if she'll approve an overtime pay for an out-of-hours meeting. She tells me not to be silly and it'll just take 10 minutes. I refuse and say if I don't get paid, we can do it tomorrow when I am being paid. She's typing, then not, then typing, then not, choosing her words. I know she's angry at being challenged, and she decided to employ one of the tactics she used when she managed a team for a company where this was standard practice. Okay, well, if you'd like to go home now, I can always make it a formal meeting. A formal meeting where I work is code for a meeting with HR, documented on your record for misconduct and repeated issues. She thinks she's won. Not a problem. Make a formal meeting. Ensure I have 24 hours notice, send a formal invite, and I will bring a support person with me. I log out and leave, but not before grabbing screenshots and saving a copy of the chat logs. Next day, she's called my bluff and has a meeting scheduled. I send it to my union rep, and she comes in on the day. HR sits down with us and opens with, "So, we're here today to discuss some concerns. Your team leader asked you to attend an off-the-cuff catch-up 3 times, and for some reason, you refused." I quickly clarify what actually happened. My manager claims otherwise, and I repeat her mantra. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. Then I supply receipts, her demands to put things in writing, her chat, my timestamps, my call logs, and her message to me afterwards. My union rep stares at the two of them with a small smile and asks, "So do you maintain the position that the employees should attend meetings unpaid, and that misconduct investigations are a good use of resources if they refuse?" HR said there may have been a miscommunication and that I could return to work. I have it put in writing that I am not accused of any misconduct and have been cleared of any false accusations, with nothing documented on my staff file. Yesterday, my team was advised that our team leader had decided to pursue opportunities outside of the company, and we were getting a new manager. Right, the team manager has decided to pursue opportunities outside of the company. This is basically translated as, the team leader made us look bad and we are not happy. Seems to me like team leader was on a little bit of a power trip, became a liability to the company, and the company toasted them and the risk has been mitigated. Our last story today comes to us from Rowan Ever. "You keep halving my time estimates? You're right. My estimates should be more reliable. Let's jump right in." A couple of decades ago, I was working as the only technical writer in a fairly large team of developers. Our manager was Cambridge educated, liked to cut estimates, and was particularly convinced that my job was easy and quick, and that I was lazy and terrible at estimates. He'd point out that the worst typist could type a page of text in an hour, so I should be getting through at least 8 pages of user manual a day. When he halved my time estimates and gave me the new deadlines, I, like the doofus I was, slaved away, worked unpaid overtime, and squeaked on over the line, and then usually ended up taking a couple of days of sick leave to recover. That eventually got me called into HR for being unreliable. Something in me snapped at that point. The next project, the same scenario played out. I gave my quite good time estimates, he poo-pooed them and halved them. I shrugged and accepted his pronouncement. He pointed out that I really needed to get better at estimating my time. Malicious compliance time. 2 weeks before the end of the 2-month project, he asked for an update. "Oh, I'm a bit over a third of the way through the documentation," I said calmly, as though there wasn't a deadline staring me in the face. He blinked and asked for an explanation. "Well, I told you it would take 4 months to do the amount of documentation you asked for, and it looks as though if I don't do any overtime, it's actually pretty close to correct, based on my progress so far." I beamed at him as though I was completely unaware that he had managers and a CTO who were expecting my documentation based on the information he gave them, along with the product it's describing, of course. Much to my surprise, it didn't even seem to occur to him to yell at me. The sheer confidence with which I delivered the devastating news had utterly confused him. He ended up helping me to cut down the requirements and then finished completing the documentation to meet the deadline. I worked my usual hours, and if he asked me to do overtime, played dumb and said, "No, sorry, I get sick if I do that, so I don't anymore." He worked a lot of overtime. I would walk past his office to see him staring at his computer monitor, biting his fingernails, and looking very, very worried. He wrote a lot of substandard documentation, and being a perfectionist, that really upset him. He didn't see his family much for 2 weeks. I spent a lot of my time at work trying not to cackle like a warlock who's had one too many pep pills. Once he had some time to recover, he called me into his office to discuss new ways of estimating time for documentation, and carefully suggested that maybe half a page to a page of documentation a day was a fair general estimate, maybe, and perhaps at some point we should look at hiring a second tech writer. It's very true that some people can listen to an explanation and understand and accept it, although others need it demonstrated, sometimes forcefully, before they reach the understanding and acceptance. I mean, I think that was about as close to an apology as you're going to get, OP. At least they changed. Check out all 3 OPs linked in the description down below. I thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.